My name is Christian Ashley, a seminary student and servant of God, and you are listening to the Let Nothing Move You podcast, a proud Anazal Ministries podcast.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Let Nothing Move You podcast. I'm your host, Christian Ashley, as we continue on through the book of Genesis. At this point in time, we are almost done. We have 2 more episodes, and we'll be done with the entire book of Genesis, all 50 chapters. Thank you all for your support, especially as we start growing our numbers, not even in America, only in America, but also overseas. I've really appreciated you guys. I would really like you to continue to listen and give me feedback on what's going on, what you like, what you don't like, how I could fix things. Anything you'd like me to do further research on, I'm game for that. And I'm saying all this in light of the fact that as we finish Genesis, we'll be continuing on through the Pentateuch into the book of Exodus. And I'm really looking forward to this. I've already been asking around to have some returning guests and then some new people show up on the podcast proper, just to join me alongside on this journey through Exodus. I think it'll be a ton of fun. I know that especially some people there that don't see eye to eye with me on how these things should be interpreted. So I'm looking forward to being challenged there. I'm hoping that you guys will get some useful insights from what they say and that you wouldn't get from me. So there's that. So in light of that, we're going to be in Genesis 46, 47, and 48 today, starting with verses 1 through 7 of chapter 46. So Israel took his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. And God spoke to Israel in visions of the night and said, "Jacob, Jacob." And he said, "Here I am." Then he said, "I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make you into a great nation. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up again, and Joseph's hand shall close your eyes." Then Jacob set out from Beersheba. The sons of Israel carried Jacob their father, their little ones, and their wives in the wagons that Pharaoh had sent to carry him. They also took their livestock and their goods, which they had gained in the land of Canaan, and came into Egypt, Jacob and all his offspring with him, his sons and his sons' sons with him, his daughters and his sons' daughters. All his offspring he brought with him into Egypt. Before the reunion can happen, Jacob makes a stop along the way to Egypt, into Beersheba. And this is noticeable, not only in that he offers sacrifices to God there, but there is historic ties to this city and offering sacrifices to God on their journeys through with the patriarchs, because both Abraham and Isaac had lived here at certain parts of their journeying through Canaan and also worshiped God there. And it shows how Jacob is honoring God by being mindful of that past, which makes God reward him with the dream he experiences in this chapter. By learning from his past, Jacob is able to move forward way beyond where he was before this incident had happened. He was in the depths of despair, wishing he was in Sheol. And now there's a renewed hope inside of him, one that restores his connection to God. And in that dream, we see here, God comforts Jacob, reminding him of who God is and that he will keep his promises to Jacob's family. Now, no doubt Jacob would have been upset at leaving his promised inheritance and the safety of the lands he knew to go to Egypt. So God, knowing Jacob well, offers him comfort and love in the midst of this trial, which will encourage Jacob to complete the journey. God knows who he's dealing with here. There's some timidity inside of Jacob that's not fully been stripped away. So what does Jacob need that will actually get him to commit to this? God personally appears in that dream and delivers the message to him. And that's the encouragement that Jacob needs in order to actually get this done. And from there, we'll continue on to verses 8 through 27. Now these are the names of the descendants of Israel who came into Egypt: Jacob and his sons, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, and the sons of Reuben, Hanak, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. The sons of Simeon, Jemuel, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, and Shaul, the son of a Canaanite woman. The sons of Levi, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. The sons of Judah, Onan, Shelah, Perez, and Zerah, but and Onan died in the land of Canaan. And the sons of Perez were Hezron and Hamul. The sons of Issachar, Tola, Puva, Yob, and Shimron. The sons of Zebulun, Sered, Elon, and Jalel. These are the sons of Leah, whom she bore to Jacob in Padan Aram, together with his daughter Dinah. Altogether his sons and daughters numbered 33. The sons of Gad, Ziphion, Haggai, Shunai, Esbon, Eri, Erodai, and Areli, the sons of Asher, Emnath, Ishva, Ishvi, Beriah, with Sarah their sister, and the sons of Beriah, Heber, and Malchiel. These are the sons of Zilpah, whom Laban gave to Leah his daughter, and these she bore to Jacob, 16 persons. The sons of Rachel, Jacob's wife, Joseph and Benjamin, and to Joseph in the land of Egypt were born Manasseh and Ephraim, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, the priest of On, bore to him. And the sons of Benjamin, Bela, Becher, Ashbel, Gera, Naaman, Ehi, Rosh, Mupim, Hupim, and Ard. These are the sons of Rachel, who were born to Jacob, 14 persons in all. The son of Dan, Husham. The sons of Naphtali, Jaziel, Guni, Jezer, and Shelem. These are the sons of Bilhah, whom Laban gave to Rachel his daughter, and these she bore to Jacob, 7 persons in all. All the persons belonging to Jacob who came into Egypt, who were his own descendants, not including Jacob's sons' wives, were 66 persons in all. And the sons of Joseph, who were born to him in Egypt, were 2. All the persons of the house of Jacob who came into Egypt were 70. Whew, all that long list to say. And Jacob's got a massive family. So let's take a look at this just a little briefly to see just how gracious and merciful God has been to Jacob and his children. In only a few decades, he has enriched their growth to the point where they are 70 members of the family, where there are 70 members of the family who now reside in Egypt, and more will come in the next 400 years. Plus, not only this, but the immense wealth and livestock that he brings with him confirms his special place with God and how he's been blessed. This is tremendous. Once again, it's just a sign of God's favor that the family thrives in this regard, that they have the wealth that they have. Not to say that the sign of not having wealth means God doesn't love you, but in this specific regard, in the promise that he has given to Abraham and his descendants, it shows that God has not abandoned them. Even he's had multiple opportunities to just give up on this family, but he doesn't. And because of that, because of their renewed faith, they're able to reunite as a family and end up in better circumstances in Egypt so that they can remain there temporarily before they go to Canaan. And this allows them a peaceful place, peaceful enough to grow and thrive, to have many children, many descendants of Jacob end up coming as a result of this move. Now, one thing you may note, for those of you who've studied your Bible more, is that there is a supposed contradiction in these verses that are brought up later on in the retelling of these events by Stephen in Acts 7:14, before his martyrdom. In Acts 7, Stephen is brought before the Jewish leaders, and he gives a defense of Jesus, a defense of the gospel, and he does so by going through the chronological story of the people of Israel, showing how God had been faithful that whole time, showing how it was all leading up to the Messiah. And in that recollection, in 7:14, he claims that 75 were in Egypt and not 70. So, hey, those numbers are 5 off. And as someone like me who takes things, interpretation of the Bible a little more literally, and making sure that everything agrees with itself, this is a huge discrepancy. It's only 5, you say, but that's still a discrepancy. That's something that needs to be addressed. So how do we reconcile this seeming discrepancy? Simply by understanding where Stephen gets the number from. He is quoting from the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament. In the Septuagint, the number is 75, not 70. The reasons for this are several. They go all over the place. Some of them include that, Jacob's wives aren't mentioned in the original text, and Joseph's sons had more children. And in fact, we see that grandchildren are named in here. Let's see, who was it? We get it from the sons of Gad, and then his son Beriah, and Beriah has grandchildren. So there's that. That's something that could be added there, as that there were missing grandchildren that weren't brought up. I lean a little closer to that one. This helps fill out the numbers, but there's an argument to be made that the 75 from the Septuagint was a mistranslation from Hebrew to Greek. And thus, Stephen was presented with false information, and so his claims are wrong, not because he himself is spreading lies and trying to and causing this contradiction, but because he has been taught lies as a result of reading the Septuagint or having heard it being read to him. Now, I hazard against using this approach because it requires a righteous man repeatedly called as someone filled with the Spirit to speak falsehoods right before his martyrdom. So I think what the Septuagint was trying to do is realize, oh, there's these other kids around here. Jacob's wives are here too, so we're going to include them in the number. That's where I lean. I want you guys to figure that out on your own. Like, this is not going to be the one thing that breaks scripture for everyone, but it's something we need to wrestle with. It's something we need to contend with. And if we don't, we ignore it, then we're part of the problem. And I don't want to be part of the problem. I'd rather be part of the solution. And we'll continue on from there to verses 28 through 34. He had sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to show the way before him in Goshen. And they came into the land of Goshen. Then Joseph prepared his chariot and went up to meet Israel his father in Goshen. He presented himself to him and fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. Israel said to Joseph, "Now let me die, since I have seen your face and know that you were still alive." Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, "I will go up and tell Pharaoh, and will say to him, my brothers and my father's household, who are in the land of Canaan, have come to me. And the men are shepherds, for they have been keepers of livestock, and they have brought their flocks and their herds and all that they have. When Pharaoh calls you and says, 'What is your occupation?' you shall say, 'Your servants have been keepers of livestock from our youth even until now, both we and our fathers, in order that you may dwell in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians.'" Here we finally have it. The reunion between father and son who have been separated from each other for over 20 years, and yet God kept both Jacob and Joseph preserved so that this moment could happen. Nothing else matters anymore to either one of them because they have finally seen each other again. Jacob even feels like he can die satisfied rather than in despair, as he's complained about doing in the past. We brought it up multiple times. He's acting like he's already dead, like he might as well be in Sheol before moments like this because he's lost his precious son and he thought he lost Benjamin too. And yet, God redeems. God brings this situation into being in a statistical impossibility that the story works this way without the intervention of God himself behind what's going on here. Now, as a result of them now living in Egypt, Joseph needs to lay down some ground rules for their sake, and he counsels his family to make themselves presentable to Pharaoh, as there might be concerns that they are an invading force of foreigners, and they need to pacify these complaints immediately. Yeah, there's still only 70, maybe 75 people coming here, and the entire nation of Egypt easily could outrun them, but they're still foreigners. They could be spies. They could be working for someone else. They could have their own interests on the throne. Now that Joseph has been revealed to be a part of their number, well, maybe he's vying to become Pharaoh. You need to calm these concerns. It's a very wise thing to do. And it doesn't help that Egyptians look down on shepherds and non-Egyptians. So this needed to be addressed as soon as possible, further showing all this wisdom that Joseph's gained over the years. Most Egyptians didn't like shepherds. There was some shepherding going in Egypt, but it was seen as a low-class kind of thing. Like, you were immensely dirty. You were always out in the fields. You were separated from other people. It just kind of was one of those things of like, oh, what are they doing over there? Why do they need to separate themselves? What's wrong about them? And then you compound that with, oh, they're not even Egyptian. Like, why are they even here? So Joseph, thinking ahead, tells them what they need to do, and we'll get into how he goes about that into chapter 47, verses 1 through 12. So Joseph went in and told Pharaoh, "My father and my brothers, with their flocks and herds and all that they possess, have come from the land of Canaan. They are now in the land of Goshen." And from among his brothers he took 5 men and presented them to Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to his brothers, "What is your occupation?" And he said to Pharaoh, "Your servants are shepherds, as our fathers were." They said to Pharaoh, "We have come to sojourn in the land, for there is no pasture for your servants' flocks, for the famine is severe in the land of Canaan. And now, please let your servants dwell in the land of Goshen." Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best of the land. Let them settle in the land of Goshen. If you know any able men among them, put them in charge of my livestock." Then Joseph brought in Jacob his father and stood him before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How many are the days of the years of your life?" And Jacob said to Pharaoh, "The days of the years of my sojourning are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained to the days of the years of life of my fathers in the days of their sojourning." And Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from the presence of Pharaoh. Then Joseph settled his father and his brothers and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramesses, as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph provided his father, his brothers, and all his father's household with food, according to the number of their dependents. We continue to see Joseph's wisdom as he, knowing how to deal with Pharaoh after years of serving him, systematically shows Pharaoh why it should be a good idea for his family to be there and how useful that they can be to him. On the outside looking in, go, "Oh, a bunch of filthy foreign shepherds, they have no place here." Like, no, they can settle in the land of Goshen. They can set up areas of influence there, create economic opportunities. They know what they're doing, and they can, in fact, even work for you since they have experience doing these things. And since I, Joseph, have proven myself worthy, well, surely my family would be of use to you too. This is a good way of using nepotism to your advantage. We kind of think of nepotism mostly in a bad sense, and to that extent, I kind of agree. There's a stage in your life we got to go, well, who's a more qualified candidate? Is it a family member? Is it someone who's actually going to get the job done? I want the one who's going to get the job done. And if that's a family member, sure, let's add them. If it's someone else, let's grab them. Like I said, this is a good use of nepotism, of allowing opportunities to be presented to your family that they wouldn't have had without your influence. And Joseph's shrewdness here is something that we can all learn from as well. Pharaoh is the highest ruler in all the land. And if he suspects any of them of trickery, deceit, dissent, he can easily order them all to be wiped out. Even after all that Joseph's done for Egypt, it doesn't matter. Joseph may be as high as he is in Egypt, but there's still only one Pharaoh, and he's the one who gets to say, "You live or die." However, because of Joseph's wise counsel, Pharaoh agrees to his demands and even offers employment to those able to assist him. This is why Joseph needed to be the person to do this. The other brothers probably wouldn't have learned this lesson as well. Only Joseph was capable of doing this, and that's why God arranged for these events to happen. So we go to Jacob in front of Pharaoh, and his responses to Pharaoh reveal how he's grown through his life. Like, these final chapters help cement Jacob as the founder of Israel, as someone who wrestles with God. And this is when he wrestled with God effectively near the end. He's not being overly cynical when he describes his life as few and evil in years, but instead, this is a remark and a slight against himself for his own iniquities and pride. Jacob knows he could have been better in his walk with God. He knows he's made conscious decisions, and so much more that went contrary to the will of God. And yet, he knows now at 130 years old how he could have been different, what he can do better now. Sometimes that's what it takes, is age and time for people to realize those things. And it took him way longer than most because, don't really see too many 130-year-olds wandering around today, if any. I was trying to remember, was the last one we had was 122 that we could prove. So what Jacob also does here is he proclaims himself a sojourner, not a resident of Egypt, but a sojourner, revealing that he does not see Egypt as his final home because he and his descendants have been promised ownership of Canaan, which shows that his trust in God has improved to the point that he believes that this will still happen. Jacob then blesses Pharaoh, and in so doing shows Pharaoh, whether Pharaoh realizes it or not, that Jacob is actually the one with the true power here, as only his blessing will be effective, given that he works alongside God rather than seeing himself as Pharaoh does, as being a living God. It's a huge contrast. One is a God appointed by right of being in charge of Egypt and the way the mythology was practiced in the land. The other is a man of God, chosen by God, despite his many failings, and he's the one who actually has the authority. This lowly shepherd, looked down upon as a foreigner, and a shepherd is the one with the actual power here. Now, a shorter note here is that you may have heard the land of Ramesses. In your history, people may have gone, wait a second, Ramesses hasn't become Pharaoh yet, and I'm with you. Let's get there. This is either an intentional anachronism by Moses, or was actually the name of the region they were in, and just happened to have the same name as the Pharaoh, who wouldn't rise to power until several hundred years after this. That is certainly possible, in that the idea being, like, hey, the name Ramesses had to come from somewhere. So wasn't it already a part of Egyptian vocabulary before it shows up in the records as a pharaoh? Probably. It's a possibility. I'm not going to put money behind that one. But the name Ramesses has to come from somewhere. All names have to come from somewhere. The way language works. So surely, at some point in Egyptian vocabulary, the word Ramesses and the name Ramesses existed. So I'm not going to discount someone who says, well, maybe that's what the region was actually named because that name existed around that time. But I disagree in that name was named after what he had done in all that respects, at least from what we can tell from the Egyptian historical records that we have left behind, which we're very grateful to have anything at this point in time. So I prefer the first suggestion, as that's most likely what Moses' original audience would have understood the area to be called. So there was no reason to needlessly confuse them with its actual name at that point in the past. It could have been called something completely and utterly different, but to his audience that he is writing these things down for, that he is speaking to, he's just saying, well, we'll just call it Ramesses because that's what they'll understand. So that's where I stand. What do you guys think? I would very much like to know. And we'll go from there to verses 13 through 31. Now there was no food at all in the land, for the famine was very severe, so that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished by reason of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, in exchange for the grain that they bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. And when the money was all spent in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, give us food. Why should we die before our eyes? For our money is gone. And Joseph answered, give your livestock, and I will give you food in exchange for your livestock if your money is gone. So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them food in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the herds, and the donkeys. He supplied them with food in exchange for all their livestock that year. And when that year was ended, they came to him the following year and said to him, we will not hide from my lord that our money is all spent. The herds of livestock are my lord's. There is nothing left in the sight of my lord but our bodies and our land. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for food, and we with our land will be servants to Pharaoh. And give us seed that we may live and not die, and that the land may not be desolate. So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. For all the Egyptians sold their fields, because the famine was severe on them. The land became Pharaoh's. As for the people, he made servants of them from one end of Egypt to the other. Only the land of the priests he did not buy, for the priests had a fixed allowance from Pharaoh and lived on the allowance that Pharaoh gave them. Therefore, they did not sell their land. Then Joseph said to the people, behold, I have this day bought you. God, every single time I've gotten that one wrong. Behold, I had this day bought you and your land for Pharaoh. Now here is seed for you, and you shall sow the land, and at the harvest you shall give a fifth to Pharaoh, and 4/5 shall be your own, as seed for the field, and as food for yourselves and your households, and as food for your little ones. And it said, you have saved our lives. May it please my Lord, we will be servants to Pharaoh. So Joseph made it a statute concerning the land of Egypt and it stands to this day that Pharaoh should have the fifth. The land of the priests alone did not become Pharaoh's. Thus Israel settled in the land of Egypt and the land of Goshen, and they gained possessions in it, and were fruitful, and multiplied greatly. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the days of Jacob, the years of his life, were 147 years. And when the time drew near that Israel must die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, if now I have found favor in your sight, put your hand under my thigh, and promise to deal kindly and truly with me. Do not bury me in Egypt, but let me lie with my fathers. Carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burying place. He answered, I will do as you have said. And he said, swear to me. And he swore to him. Then Israel bowed himself upon the head of his bed. Some translations may say staff. continuing on here, we see Joseph's shrewdness as a leader keep going on. In order to save the people of Egypt, who have run out of money to buy grain, he instead negotiates with them, first with their livestock as trade, and then with their land and their lives. Now, it's easy to be very cynical about this and proclaim him as someone who is taking advantage of their situation. But this fails to realize that this was the only way for Egypt to survive and for the people and the government not to be at odds with one another, to the point where the people thank him for saving their lives because of the measures that he took on their behalf. Taking 1/5 of the grain as a tax could have been way more excessive. And I'm sure there's some of us out there would be like, man, only 20%? That's pretty dang good. But it made sure that they could still have food and pay back what they owed without anyone being immensely put into a debt that they could never pay back. If this had been any other person, they would have pretty much enslaved these people, and that would have caused rebellions. That would have caused hatred of the government, a mistrust of leadership and authority. But instead, Joseph works it to where it's a mutual pact between government and people so that both are preserved. A very difficult task, and one I wouldn't really wish on anyone. Now, notice here also how Joseph doesn't cheat Pharaoh out of any of the earnings that he's received and always gives the full amount back to him, regardless of how much that is. A lesser man would have taken advantage of the situation and enriched himself. But Joseph was an honest man, and he refused to debase himself like this, which is something that all leaders in the church can learn from, whether they lead in the church or whether they lead outside of the church in some respect. It doesn't take much for us to realize leaders are just people. And there have been plenty of pastors in the past, plenty of preachers in the past, plenty of worship leaders or financial leaders or secretaries or what have you that have skimmed a bit off the top and just claimed a little extra income when they did nothing to earn that, when that not being part of what they are supposed to be given by the church through the loving tithes that are given. And that breaks the church, because how can you trust after that? How can you look at a leader, a pastor who has done that and say, well, you're going to do it again, aren't you? Why should I allow you to be in this position? You don't deserve it. You've proven you don't deserve it. And it's broken churches. It's created rifts. It's caused people to dig even further into sin. And it has no place in the church. And it happens across every single denomination. It's happened across every single decade since the church has been a thing. And even before then, it happened to the Jewish priests. Over the years, as they became corrupt, hey, leaders can be just as corrupt as anyone, which means that we have to be vigilant. We have to stand against that. We have to make sure these things don't happen. And when it does happen, we remove these people from power so that they do not continue to do that. Now, that doesn't mean that automatically labels them, you're never, ever going to be a leader ever again in any position. No, because there's repentance. There's forgiveness. Not in a forgive and forget kind of sense, because once again, that's not biblical, never has been biblical. Don't trust anyone who says it is. But in the fact that, hey, you did the sin. We all know it. We forgive you. We're going to give you opportunities to prove yourself again. So do not let this blow up in your face. Do not ruin the trust that we are attempting to bring back to, the union between whoever this person is and the church. Is that impossible to do? No. Is it easy to do? Also no. But it's something we need to consider. One sin does not disqualify someone from forgiveness. No matter how great it is, it does, in some circumstances, disqualify them from certain positions and from making sure that, hey, probably keep an eye on them. Make sure they're not doing that again. That I get. But we don't do that in a non-loving way. We don't do that so that, oh, well, you screwed up in the past, you're definitely going to do it again. It's like, hey, you've proven you've done this. So out of love for you and out of love for ourselves, we're going to make sure this doesn't happen again. That's smart. That's shrewd. Now, continuing on in this chapter, Jacob, realizing that he's about to die, makes Joseph promise to bury him in Canaan, knowing once more that Egypt is not their land to possess. At no point in Jewish history, outside of, the 6-Day War, do they ever own any part of Egypt. And the Sinai was eventually given back to them. The Jewish people are not supposed to own Egypt. They're not supposed to remain in Egypt. They're supposed to be in Canaan. That's their land. That's the one that God promised to them. He didn't promise them Egypt. He didn't promise them Laos. He didn't promise them Armenia. He didn't promise them Uruguay. He promised them Canaan. And Jacob knows that. So he has Joseph promise to deliver his remains there. Joseph agrees to this request and shows his fealty and love to his father, who responds in kind by bowing to his son, making the prophecy of Joseph ruling over his family fully fulfilled, and showing the respect and love between father and son. God's promises always happen. God's predictions always happen. God's prophecies are always true. Will they happen all at once? Doesn't have to be. But it happened eventually. His brothers bowed before him. The members of the family bowed before him. His father bowed before him. And that's exactly what needed to happen. And we'll continue on from there into Genesis 48. We'll be going through verses 1 through 7. After this, Joseph was told, "Behold, your father is ill." So he took with him his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And it was told to Jacob, "Your son Joseph has come to you." Then Israel summoned his strength and sat up in bed. And Jacob said to Joseph, "God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me, and said to me, Behold, I will make you fruitful and multiply you. And I will make of you a company of people, and will give this land to your offspring after you for an everlasting possession. And now your 2 sons, who were born to you in the land of Egypt, before I came to you in Egypt, are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, as Reuben and Simeon are. And the children that you fathered after them shall be yours. They shall be called by the name of their brothers and their inheritance. As for me, when I came from Padan, to my sorrow, Rachel died in the land of Canaan on the way, when there was still some distance to go to Ephrath. And I buried her there on the way to Ephrath, that is, Bethlehem. Jacob, with one of the final acts of his life, elevates Ephraim and Manasseh to equal standing with the other sons, as if they had been his first and second-born sons, so that they could inherit the blessings of God. This effectively creates the 12 tribes of Israel in this moment. In truth, this makes 13 tribes, but Ephraim and Manasseh are often combined to be one, as they are Joseph's descendants, and there are plenty of other reasons for why it's only mentioned as 12 later on. You've got Levi not really owning land, so they're sometimes not considered a tribe, even though for the most part they are. You've got Simeon being absorbed into Judah. You have the apostasy of the tribe of Dan, who are not among the number counted amongst the 144,000 in Revelation. There's multiple things going on here. The simplest way is to just say, hey, there's 12 brothers. Joseph is that 12, is part of that 12, even though Ephraim and Manasseh are considered to be other tribes at the same time. It gets screwy with the numbers. Just say 12 tribes. It's just simpler that way. 12 is more, it's not really a complete number in threat that we see in the Bible, but it happens multiple times over, your 12 disciples, so on and so forth. It just helps, brings, what's what I'm looking for here? It brings a special meaning to things in a way that 13 doesn't. And this is way before we have a fear of the number 13. That's more of a European ideal, if I remember correctly. And we'll go from there to verses 8 through 22. When Israel saw Joseph's sons, he said, "Who are these?" Joseph said to his father, "They are my sons, whom God has given me here." And he said, "Bring them to me, please, so that I may bless them." Now the eyes of Israel were dim with age, so that he could not see. So Joseph brought them near him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, "I never expected to see your face, and behold, God has let me see your offspring also." And then Joseph removed them from his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand towards Israel's right hand, and brought them near him. And Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on the hand of Ephraim, who was the younger, and his left hand on the head of Manasseh, crossing his hands, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, "The God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the boys, and in them let my name be carried on, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth." When Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the hand of Ephraim, it displeased him. And he took his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's hand. And Joseph said to his father, "Not this way, my father. Since this one is the firstborn, put your right hand on his head." But his father refused and said, "I know, my son. I know. He also shall become a people, and he shall also be great. Nevertheless, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall become a multitude of nations." So he blessed them that day, saying, "By you Israel will pronounce blessings, saying, God make you as Ephraim and as Manasseh." Thus he put Ephraim before Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, "Behold, I am about to die, but God will be with you and will bring you again to the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given to you, rather than to your brothers, one mountain slope that I took from the hand of the Amorites with my sword and with my bow." Jacob's blessing to his descendants show once again just how much he's changed in the past couple of years. In later chapters, as Genesis closes, he will bless the other brothers. But for now, he focuses on uplifting Ephraim and Manasseh and blesses them in accordance with God's wishes to show his love for them as well. His choosing Ephraim over Manasseh continues the theme of Genesis, where the younger oftentimes rules over the older sibling. It was true of Isaac and Ishmael, Jacob and Esau, Joseph and his brothers, and so it will be for them too. Later on, we even have David over his brothers. It continues to happen. Ephraim will become one of the most successful tribes of Israel and be the one for whom the nation is also named after during the split between North and South in some respects. When that does happen, Israel is often referred to as Ephraim to distinguish it from the totality of Israel, which would be all 12 tribes. For those of you who don't know, when we get to all the way to First Kings, there's going to be a split between 10 of the tribes of the north and 2 of the tribes of the south. So Israel will still exist as in everyone there is part of Israel, but there's also an Israel, also known as Ephraim, that is in the north of Israel, and then Judah will be to the south. I know it's a lot. We'll get there one day, I swear. So in this idea, Judah reigns in the south, and Israel, also called Ephraim, will reign in the north. You typically see, especially in Isaiah, him refer to it as Ephraim. But Ephraim and Israel do this at the cost of rebellion against God. And Ephraim will not be the ones through whom the Messiah comes from. So while they are being blessed right now, and they are enjoying that blessing, part of that blessing doesn't mean that they get to be the ones through whom the Messiah comes from because of what God knows they're going to do. Even so, Judah is the one who gets that right, but God still blesses Ephraim and Israel, even in the midst of their apostasy, so that they become greater than they ever deserved to be. You don't believe that? Look up Jonah one day and see how Israel, in the midst of some of its most fervent hatred of God, is still being blessed by him. To be a conquering nation, to have such a great economy, to have safety within their borders for the most part. Look it up. It's some fascinating stuff. See how God blesses those, even those who reject him, and even those who know better, especially when they don't deserve it, because he's the only one who can give those blessings. But that all happens because of these blessings that Jacob gives right here. Jacob acting in God's stead is not being self-righteous. He's not being pompous. He is acting as the will of God here to bring about the future that God knows will happen. Now, as part of Jacob's recollections that we see here, this is the first ever time that I remember, and I'm pretty sure it is the first ever time in Scripture, that God is referred to as a shepherd over his people, specifically Jacob, in this circumstance. And as a nation filled with shepherds, This analogy made perfect sense to the Jews, as they would be reminded of how God treated them like the sheep that they were, who often needed to be led back to where they were supposed to be, just like a shepherd would do to a wayward sheep. And this idea of God as shepherd is going to show up multiple times over in Scripture, old and new, because it makes sense to the people listening. They can see and look out, go, oh, a shepherd has to lead the sheep away. And those sheep, they're kind of dumb. They need someone smart. They need someone who knows what they're doing to make sure they're where they're at. And when one of those sheep leaves, the shepherd has to be the one to pick them up and bring them back, or at sometimes even harm that sheep and cripple them to make sure they don't make mistakes. And that's the same way God has to work with us. At times, we need to be crippled spiritually because of what we've done against Him. There are times when He needs to move away and grab us and pick us back up and place us where we belong because we led ourselves astray, because we think we know what's best. And Jacob knows about this a lot better than some people, living as long as he did and making as many mistakes and intentional choices to sin as he did. And yet, near the end of his life, he recognizes God as shepherd and praises Him for it. And with that, we're done. Next week, we'll be finishing up Genesis 49 and 50. And from there, we'll go into Exodus. I'm still working out the schedule to see that who's able to come and what episodes or what chapters they want to be on. I've already got some positive responses that for people who want to go to certain chapters. I'm looking forward to it. So thank you guys for all that you do. Please, if you get a chance to leave a 5-star review on your podcasting platform of choice, just help us with the ratings there. If you're all interested in some my fiction writing, you can find my works at starvingwritersguild.com or on Amazon by searching for the name MC Ashley. If you're interested in some further solid studies into the Bible and its teachings, then check out the other members of the Anasound Ministries Podcasting Network. You can contact me at letnothingmoviepodcast@gmail.com, and don't let it be just another spam mail of, hey, we just listened to your most recent podcast and we think you're perfect for this deal where we just do this and set ChatGPT up for all this stuff. Don't do it. I hate it. Please, if you're listening and it's not an automated message, which I assume most of these are, just stop. I don't have the money. It's not going to happen, even for a free trial. And with that in mind, I'd like to extend a special thank you to Joshua Knoll for the editing that he does and for the music that he adds to the podcast. And with all that in mind, God bless you all in accordance to His will and not mine. And allow me one more time to remind you, let nothing move you.
Hey guys, are you interested in podcasting but don't know where to go? Well, check out Zencaster.com and go ahead and make an account there and use special promo code Let Nothing Move You, all caps. That way you can get 30% off of your next deal to go ahead and set things up so you can figure out how to edit stuff using Zencaster.com to host your stuff, to get things done there. So check out Zencaster.com, use special promo code Let Nothing Move You. All right, see ya.